Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, taking a deep dive into this Florida State Seminoles offense heading into 2023. Took a deep dive onto the defense a couple weeks ago, and for the same reasons we're so high on the defense, a lot of the same things you can talk about with the offense. I mean, you have the star power, right? Johnny Wilson, Keon Coleman, Jordan Travis, Trey Benson, who I think is probably one of the best running backs, if not the best running back in the whole entire country. But more importantly, this Florida State team, specifically on the offensive line, has improved their depth. Not only do they have a few guys that we'll talk about that I think are legit NFL caliber dudes, but you take a look at the depth that hurt Florida State at times last year. I think Mike Norvell, Alex Atkins have done a really good job fixing that. Excited to get into this team and this unit. Now, before we do, just want to say thank you to you guys, and especially the Florida State fans. You guys have shown a ton of support to the boys. It's no secret. We are very high on this Florida State team heading into 2023. So one, if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. But more importantly, let me know in the comment section what you guys think, certain players that we should be looking out for as breakout candidates. Again, the best part about doing this is learning from you guys, talking ball with you guys in the comment section. So let me know what you all think. And let's get into this team. And I think when you talk Florida State offense, you got to start with Jordan Travis, who I think the most exciting aspect of Jordan Travis is this is the most talented offense that he's been surrounded by during his time at Florida State. And I was reading some NFL draft stuff in terms of Jordan Travis, and a lot of the scouts say that he's kind of maxed out his potential. I, quite frankly, just think that's wrong. I mean, you look back at Jordan Travis's numbers, he's gotten better year after year after year. And I don't think it's crazy at all to see him taking another step, especially as a pocket passer in 2023, when you factor in all the weapons that he'll be throwing to in 2023. So to talk about Jordan Travis just not taking a step when he's made a step the last 3 years in college football, that doesn't really make much sense to me. And on top of that, you look back at what he did in the pocket last year. I mean, a 64% completion percentage, that is really good. But what's even more impressive, a 9.1 yards per attempt. I mean, so he's not only completing a high percentage of his footballs, but he's also pushing the football down the field, and that's kind of rare. Normally, you see guys really high completion percentage, not a really long target distance, right? He's pushing the ball down the field, completing more passes, and taking care of the football. Jordan Travis, I mean, you start printing the shirts. This guy is a bona fide Heisman contender, and this offense is going to run right through Jordan Travis, who I might add last year, I mean, was banged up for a majority of the year, and that is I mean, as much as he's improved as a pocket passer, a large part of his game is still using his athleticism. He's one of the best runners with the football at that quarterback position. So Jordan Travis, that's where it starts. I think you can see him take another step. He's done it every single year. Now he's surrounded by a insanely deep offense with weapons all over the field. Now we're going to get to the wide receiver position, but I do want to talk about this running back room that I think is one of the best in the country, right? You lose Treshaun Ward, who one of my favorite players on Florida State last year, former walk-on. A lot to like about Ward. I think a lot of Florida State fans wishing him the best at Kansas State. Trey Benson, I mean, that, to be honest, if there's a reason why Ward might have left, is he deserves more carries, and he probably wasn't going to get those carries behind Trey Benson. Trey Benson, I think, deserves to be in the, I was coming from a Michigan fan right now. Trey Benson deserves to be in the conversation of Blake Corum, Donovan Edwards, Travion Henderson, all the other top running backs in the country. I think that's how good Trey Benson is. 6.4 yards per carry last year. It sounds like he's fully healthy. And again, like that was kind of the story. It's like this dude was super talented. He had that really, really gruesome injury at Oregon. A healthy Trey Benson that we saw last year, getting more touches in 2023. I mean, you're truly looking at a special running back. And then to round it out, I mean, Lawrence Tufili, I hope I said that name right. I've said it so many different ways. A guy that I've been talking about for years in terms of like a change of pace, a guy that you want to get in space. I don't know if scat back might be a little disrespectful, but I mean, he's a guy that can hurt you in so many different ways, including out of the backfield, and redshirt freshman Rodney Hill. I mean, this is a deep running back room with legit bona fide star talent with Trey Benson. Now to get to the best part of this Florida State offense, and you take a look back 2 years ago, we were talking about one of the worst wide receiver rooms, not in the ACC. I mean, there were no bona fide wide receiver ones. Jordan Travis was kind of working and throwing to guys that, I mean, you kind of never really heard of. And now you take a look at the wide receiver room and what Mike Norvell and Alex Atkins have done to this pass catcher room. This is where it gets fun. And this is where I don't Like when you're trying to scheme up a defense, how can you stop all these playmakers on the field? Now, starting with the wide receiver room, you have probably the two biggest mismatch nightmares in the country with Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman, who, again, as a Michigan fan, I know very well. He is what he's been billed and probably more. I mean, that Michigan State offense stunk last year, and if they had any success, it was going to Keon Coleman. Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson, their ball skills and their size, it's just gonna be so hard for cornerbacks to deal with. And then you sprinkle in some other guys who do some different things. Getting to a few guys, Winston Wright Jr. I think is the biggest wild card. If there is one knock in this Florida State offense, it's who's working on the inside. You got arguably the two of the better boundary receivers in the whole entire country with Johnny Wilson and Keon Coleman. Who's going to be kind of producing on the inside? Winston Wright Jr. had that brutal car accident. Again, if you guys remember 12 months ago, I was banging the table for this kid transferring from West Virginia. He is electric with the ball in his hands. He's electric in space. He can create separation. If he gets healthy, if he gets right, I mean, Winston Wright Jr. is going to be a major part of this offense, kind of replacing what Micah Pittman was able to do for Florida State last year. I think Ketron Portier has been a guy that you guys have been hammering in the comment sections, a guy I need to talk about. You go back to the spring notes. He is a guy that probably was the most consistent wide receiver all spring from what it sounded like. Another guy that we didn't talk about because we haven't talked about this Florida State offense that much recently, Dustin Hill. Finally with the Florida State program, he's another guy that when you go through and read the fall camp notes, you keep seeing his name pop up. You talk about true freshman Hakeem Williams, Darian Williamson. It's a loaded wide receiver room. I mean, there is like 7-8 guys with the NFL talent, but also the depth behind them that could really be playmakers. And then you get to the tight ends. And I think this might be one of the biggest storylines of this Florida State offense. Alex Atkins is very good at using tight ends, but he hasn't really had, I think, the difference makers at tight ends that he has right now. When Jaheim Bell you talk about like an offensive weapon, Jaheim Bell at South Carolina was a dude that they just at one point just started, hey, we're going to turn around and just give you handoffs. That's how good you are. If you don't have a guy step up on the inside as like kind of an inside receiver, I think Jaheim Bell is kind of a jumbo slot, could really do some damage in that role. And then you have a guy in Kyle Morlock who's a big body dude who can work the middle of the field. Florida State, if you envision a pass catching offense as a basketball team where you need different wide receivers to do different things, I mean, this is a complete basketball team. You have the big bodies. You have some of the smaller guys who can create separation in those short intermediate routes. You have the matchup nightmares. You have like the power forward in Jaheim Bell. This is an offense that it can hurt you in so many ways that it's going to be impossible for defenses to scheme up against. And now the last part, and I think the puzzle piece that could result in the biggest uptick in this Florida State offense. And again, not really, it's kind of hard to find flaws when this Florida State team was healthy on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, one was probably the offensive line where it wasn't a liability like it has been in the past for Florida State, but it wasn't great. I think it could be a lot better in 2023. You take a look at what they brought in. Well, I want to start with the guys returning. Bless Harris apparently making some strides. Robert Scott Jr., Bless Harris, two guys that from a physical standpoint, from a physical tool set standpoint, are NFL caliber guys. And now you're talking about last year, you're talking about a Florida State offensive line that was average, but really lacked depth. Now you have Bless Harris and Robert Scott Jr., two guys who probably will be on NFL camps in 12 months from now, competing for a left tackle spot. And then Jeremiah Byers coming from the group of five. Apparently, he's just a lock to play right tackle. Looks really good. Was really a coveted guy out of the transfer portal. And then you look on the inside, a ton of guys who played a ton of snaps. Casey Roddick coming in through the transfer portal. Dimitri Emmanuel, Maurice Smith. It's a really loaded offensive line. I think the talent is there. But more importantly, where Florida State really got last year at times is that depth. So you take a look at this Florida State offense as a whole. This was a top 20 group last year, especially when healthy. They returned pretty much all of their guys. They even get better in the transfer portal, adding guys like Keon Coleman, Jaheim Bell, Kyle Morlock, a bunch of guys on the offensive line. When I'm looking at opposing defenses, I don't really know where this Florida State offense is susceptible to kind of getting after you, right? Especially when you have Jordan Travis being the athlete, being the true playmaker that he's kind of emerged to be. You have a high caliber quarterback surrounded by a ton of offensive weapons one of the best running backs in the backfield, and an improved offensive line. This was a top 10 unit last year, and it is really hard to see this Florida State team not taking another step in the right direction heading into 2023. And for all these, Florida State offense might be one of the better units that we see in the entire country. And you talk about the goals of Florida State, it's national title. And you look at the depth chart and you ask why. I mean, the reason why is because they have a national title contending team. The depth chart's complete. They're really, really deep. They have the high-end playmaking ability. This is going to be a blast team to watch in 2023. Cannot wait for that week 1 game against LSU. You're going to find out a lot about this Florida State offense. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys as usual. And if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all